Hi, I'm Jonathan Saenz, the president of Texas Values and Texas Values Action. Together, our team provides the most comprehensive and aggressive advocacy and protection for marriage and religious freedom across the state of Texas for statewide and local issues. I'm happy to be talking to you today because there's some important issues happening in our state, particularly as it relates to marriage and religious freedom. Now, Texas Values Action is the advocacy and lobbying arm of Texas Values. And not only that, but it allows us to get involved in election issues as well. And that's important because of what's happening today and as we move forward on issues of marriage and religious freedom. You've probably seen by now that the U.S. Supreme Court issued a decision on the issue of gay marriage recently. This is by far the most egregious example of judicial activism of our time. And we are not going to stand by and just let it happen. Now, you know, Texas Values Action has been involved in major policy issues at the Capitol. That's where we lobby at the state capitol and locally on important measures like the Pastor Protection Law. And speaking of the Pastor Protection Law, Texas Values Action was the architect of that legislation and was by far the main organization that was making that bill become part of law through every part of the legislative process, providing legal analysis, providing email updates, and providing direct lobbying at the Capitol to elected officials when those issues were happening. And particularly when the ACLU and other organizations threatened that law by trying to weigh it down with harmful amendments, we were there making sure that it didn't happen. Now, we're all seeing how important that pastor protection law is now the Supreme Court has ruled. But there are many other issues related to this that we're very concerned about. And that's how it relates to issues on elections. What's going to happen now as we move forward with elected officials? Are they going to stand for marriage and religious freedom? We're already hearing reports that candidates and some elected officials are suggesting that we should just move on from these issues related to marriage and religious freedom. Even some Republicans are saying that. This is a mistake, and we will not allow this to stand. We call on you to make sure that you hold your elected officials accountable on these issues and that you demand they continue to stand for religious freedom and marriage, or they will not be getting your vote. I can guarantee you, when it comes to the work that we do as far as endorsing candidates and as far as being involved in elections, that we are going to make it clear that you will never get an endorsement for Texas Values Action if you do not stand for the biblical definition of marriage between one man and one woman, and you don't stand robustly for religious freedom as it should be. Now, we will do our part when it comes to those issues, but it's not just about the Supreme Court and about what's happening with elected officials. It's also about what policy measures are people going to try to change. Now, during the legislative session, Texas Values Action was the main organization when someone tried to attack mother and father being listed in birth certificate forms, with the effort being to try to remove those references or have the impact of having those references of mother and father being removed from birth certificate forms. Our organization was the main organization that made it clear that that wasn't going to happen, and we defeated that legislation. But there were numerous other pieces of legislation that attacked the family and religious freedom that Texas Values Action was a part of defeating. But in addition to that, we advanced several pieces of legislation that would have supported marriage and religious freedom. Now, unfortunately, those measures never got to a vote. Now, thankfully, we did get the Pastor Protection Law passed and signed into law by a bipartisan group of elected officials, but we must do more. Now, I want to tell you for a minute a little bit about myself personally. You know, there's a lot of people suggesting that there are other issues we need to deal with, and that simply because the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that the marriage issue is over. It is far from over. As a matter of fact, this is really just the beginning of one of the most important phases when it comes to the issue of marriage. And it's not just about the legal issue, about the policy issue. It is about the unchangeable nature of the fact that a man and a woman together, that is marriage. The Supreme Court or 5 justices of the Supreme Court can never change that. But let me tell you something about myself. Before I got involved in this work, I was a student at the University of Houston, and I was the head of a pro-life group where our religious freedom and free speech rights were being threatened. Some of the members of our group were even threatened to not be allowed to graduate. And I put everything on the line. I put the career that I have now and the advocacy ability I have now on the line to protect religious freedom and to protect free speech and to protect the values that make Texas great. Now, thankfully, we were successful in that lawsuit and our rights were protected. But I know what it's like to go through those battles. I know what it's like to have the government bearing down on you and being able to stand up and say, not on my watch. And that's a part of who I am personally, and that's what our organization brings to the table professionally. We know what people are going through and what they're going to be challenged with when it comes to their values of marriage and religious freedom, and you can count on us to stand by your side and see you through to victory. That's why we're calling on you today to give the most generous gift you can. Whether it comes to policy issues, whether it comes to elections, or just having the freedom and the confidence to stand for marriage and religious freedom in Texas, we know the challenges are going to be great. And that's why we need your support for the work that we do so we continue to stand up for the values of faith, family, and freedom, which are and always will be Texas values. And that's why we're going to continue to stay committed to them.